back home, there's this area in the mountains where you can go, and maybe on the Blue Ridge Parkway there, but there's a time of year where these lightning bugs, right? Like they light up in synchrony, man, almost like it's a musical, man. And to this day, I'm sure there's some science behind it and a reason behind it, but where else in the world would you see something like that? And I remember looking at that, like, man, like there has to be something bigger, some entity, some supreme being that makes that happen, right? And
welcome in to Menfolk Journeys, the podcast of great conversations with men. I'm your host, Chris Foster, and we're going to explore how we wear this beautiful and confusing mantle of manhood in the 21st century. Look, I get it. In public life, a lot of men are knuckleheads. But in private life, we can be thoughtful and we can be reflective if we have the right conversation, if we feel comfortable talking about our story. And we all have a great story to tell. And we can all learn from those stories. We can learn about who we've been, who we are, and who we want to be. And that's why we're going to have this conversation, so we can learn from other men just like us. And in this episode, we're going to talk with my new friend, Anthony. Anthony spent his youth in a beautiful rural environment in Appalachia, surrounded by family. And now as an older adult, he's in a beautiful, serene, rural environment in New Mexico, surrounded by family. But in between, he was a U.S. Air Force combat pilot and spent years saving others, and then he had to learn how to save himself. And now he's on a mission to help other people save themselves too, with their stories of recovery and redemption. This is an amazing story. He's a beautiful, amazing man. Hope you enjoy. Welcome in to Menfolk Journeys. Hey folks, this is Chris, and I wanted to let you know that you can support this episode. If you love these conversations and get something out of them, you can support the show by helping me with the platform fees and technologies that make this show happen. Simply go to buymeacoffee.com/menfolkjourneys. Look, I know it's a long URL, but it works. buymeacoffee.com/menfolkjourneys, just like it sounds. You can donate $1, $5, $3, $10, whatever. You can even make it monthly. And all proceeds go to support the technologies I use to make this show happen. Thank you so much, and enjoy the episode. Well, Anthony Dyer, welcome in.
Thanks for having me, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, I'm honored that you're here. So tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I live out in New Mexico. We have 3 cats and unfortunately 3 cats and 2 dogs, and then I live with my wife and have a kid about 9 years old. And yeah, man, I just settled out here one December 21 after Air Force retirement, and here I am.
Here you are. So first of all, thank you for your service. Secondly, congratulations on your retirement. Offers just a second life. And interesting, what about New Mexico as a place to live drew you so that it's your forever home where you wanted to raise a family?
Yeah, so I've been here twice, from 2010 to 2015, then from call it 19 to 21 there, into 21 there. And honestly, my wife and her family and the sort of the native culture up near Gallup, I fell in love with the Native American culture even when I was a kid in Appalachia there, and growing up 20 minutes away from the Eastern Band of Cherokee Nation, and just beautiful places and beautiful people, awesome food. We're big on green chili out here. If you've never had that, yeah, and there is some rough parts of New Mexico, right? Like Breaking Bad was filmed in Albuquerque, right? So that's like that car wash there. I tell people it's like a national monument. But yeah, just retired to the Air Force here, and I was able to keep somewhat of a job in the aviation world, doing the flight simulator stuff at Canada Air Force Base, and proud to call it home now. So the land of enchantment.
It's interesting, Anthony, because I think that place is a really important part of our life, right? There are some folks who live in places and never quite feel settled, never feel connected. There are some folks who really connect to the place that they're in. You instantly now just drew a parallel between growing up in Appalachia and kind of a similar, I'm not going to call it a spirit or vibe or maybe it is being in New Mexico. Do you feel connected to New Mexico as a place in terms of, like you said, the Native American culture, the landscape, the atmosphere? Does it connect to you in a deeper way?
Yeah, I would say a home's still a home, right? The mountains of North Carolina is still, it's a beautifully cursed place, I like to say. But yeah, there's some beautiful parts here as well, and it's just different, different trees. Like there's no coniferous trees out here like you get in Western North Carolina and all that good stuff. But that's still my roots. That's my home, But I always looked at it as like I joined the Air Force to see the world, right? And that was part of it. And basically, this is where I found where my peace at.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? There's a sense as we start traveling in the world where there are certain places that feel like home, that feel like sanctuary, right? That, and the fact that New Mexico feels sanctuary, and it can call upon some of the aspects of growing up in Appalachia, but it's still not your childhood, right? I mean, it's kind of like this is your adult sanctuary, where when you were younger, you had the childhood sanctuary of North Carolina.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those things where like I was lucky enough to settle here, and I sort of showed up to the group project and got an A, right? Like, you know what I mean? So that was always me in high school, but yeah, it was it worked
That's
out,
awesome.
and my wife, and that's my rock and everything, and so I would follow her to the ends of the earth,
Sure. So I love your phrase, which is very poetic, by the way, calling where you grew up beautifully cursed. So I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it's a funny place, Pittsburgh, because it's urban, right? It's a city itself, and there's of course all the history of the steel workers and European immigrants and all that stuff. But what a lot of folks don't realize is that Pittsburgh's only about an hour and 15 minutes away from West Virginia. It's 50 minutes into Ohio, right? It's very close to what folks would consider quote unquote Appalachia. And in fact, north of Pittsburgh, there's a small town called Butler, and north of Butler is a small town called Chicora, where my dad spent some years. And Chicora was rural enough, I would say, that my dad's neighbor had an oil well, like on his property, right? And right, I mean, it gets very rural very quickly in that part of it. And so I'm pretty intrigued by your growing up. I read a book called Demon Copperhead by a woman named Barbara Kingsolver. And she was interesting, Anthony, because she said Appalachia is like a place, but this place is like between northern Georgia and southwestern Pennsylvania and parts of North Carolina and Kentucky and Tennessee, and it kind of moves in that entire area. And she said, there are people who live like in, your part of North Carolina or West Virginia or our part of Pennsylvania, that they have a lot more in common with each other than someone in northern Georgia would have with someone who lives in Atlanta, right? I mean, a completely different way to live. And one of the things that I love about her book is that she said, and what's a beautiful place about Appalachia is that you are connected to the land. You can't escape it. You're part of it, right? It's part of you. Did you feel that growing up? As you grew up in that North Carolina area, did you feel connected to the ruralness and the land itself?
Yeah. No, and there's some things that are very Appalachia specific. Have you ever heard of like dowsing rods, for example? Yeah,
dowsing rods.
So what this is, I actually heard a physicist, I believe, on Sean Ryan talking about it, and I think it's Randall Carlson. But basically, when I was a young man, right, like my grandfather taught me, and it's how you find water in Appalachia. A lot of people can do it, but you get these two copper wires and you bend them at a 90-degree angle, and you walk, and then these, when you're over the water, they'll cross like very violently. They're like almost like you're catching a fish, and we used to call it, witching water, so you really are like that sort of connected to that landscape and the ruggedness and the ley lines, and especially the rivers was always very special to me as well growing up. And I tell people if I wanted to go fishing, I'd walk half a mile down to the beautiful Tuckasegee River and fish for brown trout, rainbow trout, and the biggest thing about Appalachia is the people. I think you saw some of that resilience after the hurricane, right? And I was in New Mexico, and I remember not talking to my parents for like a week, but the sense of community is so strong where like there was one person that had cell service, and by the grace of God, I called her, and she, or I'd messaged her, and she went to check on my parents, and just that sense of community. Everybody's got everybody's back, and there is some moments, where everybody knows everybody's business, and that can be good or bad depending on the scenario, right? So yeah.
She did mention that. That was so funny. I heard an interview with her. She was really thoughtful about where she lives. She still lives there, and she's got a small farm. And she said there are a couple things. She said, first, everybody knows everybody's business. And that's a good thing, and it's a bad 100%. Thing, right? It's a good thing because they're looking out for you. It's a bad thing because everyone knows your business. So you have to be, you just have to be down with that, right?
I mean, news in the neighborhood spreads fast, right? And I tell people, like, I can imagine, like, so you're sort of close to people, but not as close as you would be in like a city, right? But like, for example, my mind goes to like when Netflix came out, right? Like everyone probably shared their. I would have shared my Netflix password. That's just how close you are to your friends, right? Just that level of just loyalty to each other, and there's those people in that region. They'll give you the shirt off their back, and as cliche as that sounds, they really would.
Sure. No, I believe it, and she was so interesting too, and I think that so the book Demon Copperhead takes place in Appalachia, and it was inspired in part by two main works. One is called Dope Sick, which was the nonfiction story about the Sackler family pumping out the opioids into rural areas intentionally, right? They sought out rural hospitals, which were hard to get to, and they just flooded that zone with opioids to give to their patients, which of course devastated communities. And the other thing that Barbara was looking at was that after the devastation, she said, well, no one's talking about the orphans. No one's talking about those kids of those parents. And so she said, well, no one knows more about orphans than Charles Dickens. So I'll read David Copperfield and I'll turn it into Demon Copperhead. So she kind of wrote a parallel story. But part of that was that Appalachia is I don't know, Anthony, you could smell the grass on the pages, right? I mean, you could feel the dirt. I mean, it seeps through the book. And what she talks about is the necessary connection to the land. Like you said, you went fishing. I got to believe it. I'll ask you, but I'm assuming you ate the fish you caught, right?
I was taught at a very young age how to to clean a fish and then cook it right and everything like that. But yeah, and there's nothing better than the actual native, like, brown trout or rainbow trout, like to the rivers, not like a stock one, right? But yeah, you get taught a lot of that stuff just naturally growing up. It was just almost expected, sort of that
right.
Resilient mindset, if you will. But that was always like sort of instilled in me. Like, you always fall down 7 times, but you always get up 8. Was I can hear my grandfather saying that to this day. So.
What did he say?
So basically, you fall down 7 times, get up 8, and he would always inspire me to leave a legacy, with that. And basically, he asked me one time, he was like, "Hey, do you remember your great grandfather's name?" And I should, but I don't. That's the reality of it. And basically, what he was getting at was all you can leave behind is your memory, right? It's how you're remembered, and so basically, he's like, "Do you want people to remember you for being a guy that laid down or a guy that stands up?"
Mm-hmm. So I guess I'll ask you about your grandfather. What was his name?
William E. Haffey, real Scott Irish name in that area. The Scottish Tartans and all that. And yeah, he was an amazing man. He worked to really late in his life there, and worked at a pig farm in Waynesville, sort of near Haywood, Waynesville, North Carolina. But 6 foot, I think he was 6'5", just a beast of a man, and just loved God, loved his country, and loved his family, and loved his neighbor,
Sure. So, how tall are you?
Right at 6 feet. I didn't get the full Nephilim gene.
Right at 6 feet, just right at the. So I bet when you were a young boy, Anthony, your grandfather must have seemed like a giant.
He was huge, yeah. And his dad Rudolph was actually taller. I think my mom told me about 6'8". Believe it or not, he was that tall of a man, and there was a lot of like preachers in my preachers in my mom's side of the family seemed like, like linear and stuff like that. And I sort of, to piggyback off that, the story, Demon Copperhead, right? Like I grew up with good parents. Like I didn't grow up with I didn't lose anybody to drugs or alcohol. And I did lose a great uncle, my
Mm-hmm.
grandfather's brother, to he drank himself to death. But yeah, they always instilled like, like just being a good person goes a long way in this world. And, this day and age, I think somewhere we've forgotten that.
It's interesting you say that because, being a good person, I think you're right. It used to be that was
Right.
enough. It used to be that goodness in somebody was how you met the measure of a man or a woman, right? Now there's a lot of labels attached. How much money do you have? What job do you have? Blah, 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 your career. In looking and reflecting on your grandfather, I'm assuming so, but would you say that he was a good man? Did he understand that sense of goodness?
Oh yeah, my grandfather. If someone they were elderly, like needed their yard mowed. I remember on the weekends he would grab me and we'd go mow yards, and he'd give me $20 and we'd get a milkshake there in Waynesville. And yeah. He was always big, big into community, and just lending a hand goes a long way in that community.
Sure. So, how old were you when he passed?
So I was, let's see, he was, I think 2006, I believe it was. How many years ago was that? About 20 years
20.
ago. So 43, I was about 23, 24 years old. Yep.
Okay. Just right on the cusp of young adulthood. What was that like, if I can ask? What kind of feelings and thoughts did you go through when your grandfather passed along?
Yeah, I just remember that was the sort of the I don't know if this is the right word, but matriarch of our family. Our cornerstone of how in my eyes, like the man I wanted to be like, and to and learning the value of hard work, and never giving up, and my grandfather, he wasn't an educated man. He may have quit school at like, I think it was like 5th or 6th grade or something like that, but he worked to almost the day he died, man. And he loved every second on that pig farm up there.
So he did have a love of life, right? He wasn't angry at where he was or upset about getting old. I imagine that must have created a really deep impression on you. I mention it, Anthony, because I think of my grandfather. So my grandfather on my mom's side was someone I never met. He died when my mom was about 11. My grandfather on my dad's side, though, I did know. And unfortunately, I didn't actually, at the time, I didn't actually feel or see a lot of admirable qualities in him. He drank a lot. And so he was completely grouchy. I was absolutely terrified of this guy. There wasn't very much warmth, and it was a thing where I didn't see my grandfather as a model of manhood. So I'm really intrigued by your experience, where growing up, especially if he was physically huge and just a giant, like I said, a titan of a man, he must have impressed upon you a version of manhood that you wanted to be. It sounds like.
Oh yeah, he definitely did. He was a man's man, and he was telling me all these stories about back in the day, like when they were sort of moonshine type stuff, right? And and about how he and I asked him his thoughts on God and everything, and this is way before I was considering myself saved. And he's like, man, he's like, I caught myself running from God, right? Running from the truth, and what he's getting at is sort of just that God, in the end wants us to be our brother's keeper, look out for each other. And in that moment, he told me that's when his life changed forever, and he quit doing the moonshine stuff and all that. But some interesting stories that come in that world with Appalachia in itself. So,
yeah, it's an interesting thing where I hope this doesn't land the wrong way, but when you talk about Appalachia, grandfather drinking moonshine, I mean, that's a cliche, right? That's what everybody thinks, right?
Yeah. It was pretty wild, because my dad sent me I think it was in the Silver Herald, but that's my dad's side of things. And my 71-year-old grandmother got caught selling some liquor, as he says, and there may have been a gun involved and stuff like that. And I was like, man, the other day, like, I posted. I think I may have put on Instagram. I was like, did anybody else's 71-year-old grandmother get pinched selling moonshine, right? and that was just the norm back then, And there's guys like,
Sure.
you hear about Popcorn Sutton, the legendary moonshiner, and he would always say it's not a sin for a man to sell some liquor and make a living.
Well, not only that, but to make their own, because one of the things that Barbara Kingsolver writes about in Demon Copperhead is the Whiskey Rebellion was one of those first moments where the government actually imposed its will on a community that was just making its own whiskey, making its own alcohol, which, I mean, you have to think why is that a crime? Well, it was a crime to the government because they weren't getting the taxes, right? And so what right? It's this whole thing where, when she was talking about Appalachia as a culture, she said, look, in Appalachia, she said, especially for me personally, I've got a small farm. It's not a huge farm, but do I have chickens? Yes. Do I have my own eggs? Yes. Do I have a couple of cows? Yes. Do I get my own milk? Yes. Do I grow my own produce? Yes. Can I make my own corn? Yes. I've got tomatoes. I've got this. I can actually be self-sustaining. I don't have to go to a corporate-owned grocery store and buy crap and pay taxes and give those taxes to the government. I don't have to do that. And she said, that immediately creates a sense of resiliency and self-sufficiency in the community, but it also immediately puts you at odds with what the government wants you to do, which is pay your tax, right?
Yeah, they're always going to want their dollar, you know what I mean, no matter what you do in life. But, a lot of people don't realize either, like, if you think how the mafia, like, right, for example, really came to power, it was because alcohol was illegal, right? And, so you see sort of the fallout from, the government wanting their dollar and then someone exploiting that, and that's moonshine worked in a very, very similar way, I would say.
Yeah. And it's an interesting thing. I think what it does, though, I think it taps into what you just talked about a sense of community, right? If you got extra eggs and your neighbor needs some help, and I've got a bunch of eggs. Here's some eggs, right? Oh, you've got some extra zucchini. Bring it over to me, right? There's a shared sense of living off the land and living with each other, and it's an interesting thing because one of the things that she talked about was she saw poverty in Appalachia, and she was contrasting that to poverty of the character. So the character goes into Knoxville, Tennessee, and the poverty in Knoxville, well, that was a lot worse than the poverty where he was, because the poverty where he was in a rural community, you could go fishing, you could get your own eggs, you could live off the land. But if you're in Knoxville and you're impoverished, you're on the streets, you're on a city street, right? You need money to actually live. And it was and I never thought about it before that way, Anthony, where, using, for so many people living in cities, we're so disconnected from the land, we wouldn't know how to live off the land.
Oh yeah. And I think there's something to be said too with, I think in that story as well too, right? Like you realize how fragile hope is, right? In the mountains there, and you see something like, the opioid epidemic that came through, then you had the hurricane, right? And you really see like people's everything gets like, it's gone, right? In a blink of an eye. So there's something about that area that, some may say it's cursed, right? And it's a very spiritual place, but you definitely, like I said, realize how fragile that hope is there.
Mm-hmm. So why do you think it's spiritual? What strikes you as it being a spiritual place? And the reason that I ask is that I kind of get you, right? I mean, when we would do vacations, we'd go to the Shenandoah Valley, and sometimes we go in the Great Smoky Mountains and the like. And I've been through the lakes in Kentucky, and there's something about it, about being surrounded by that kind of land and landscape. As growing up, did you think of it as spiritual, or was that just something that you're thinking about now, reflecting on your past?
I really did. And back home, there's this area in the mountains where you can go, and maybe on the Blue Ridge Parkway there, but there's a time of year where these lightning bugs, right? Like they light up in synchrony, man, almost like it's a musical, man. And to this day, I'm sure there's some science behind it and a reason behind it, but where else in the world would you see something like that? And I remember looking at that like, man, like there has to be something bigger, some entity, some supreme being that makes that happen, right? And so you're sort of connected with all that nature, and there's things that I found out that were parallel, like even to New Mexico in general. Like my wife's Navajo, right? And I would always say, growing up, you don't ever whistle at night, because
Mm-hmm.
in Appalachia, if you do that, the idea is that you're inviting some spirit in, or whatever we think we called them haints or something like that,
Sure.
and they believe that too out here. So it was, there has to be something there, right, to where like it is 100% like spiritual.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. There's because you said that in North Carolina is near where the Cherokee Nation was.
Correct.
Was
Yeah.
that it? So I would think that there would be a parallel between the Native American connectedness to the land in North Carolina, the Native American connectedness to the land in New Mexico. Um, Probably feels very comfortable for you and echoes of your childhood when you go. It's maybe a different place, but there's still a land, people, spiritual connection that probably feels familiar.
Oh yeah, and there was something, and I didn't put this in the book. You know how you think of things after the book, right? And so I was talking to a guy, and there's this Cherokee, like basically the idea of the two wolves theory. Like I subscribe to that a lot, and what that is like, so
What
it's
is that?
basically saying, okay, every man or woman, that you have two wolves, right? And it's like saying you have a wolf on this shoulder, right? That's saying, giving you positive, information, give you positive motivation, getting you to do good, and to have morals, do the right thing, and to be motivated. And then you have the other side of that. You have this negative wolf that's trying to drag you to, I don't know, opioids, alcohol, to everything that comes with that, like basically that level of sin, right? And the one that wins is the
Mm-hmm.
one you feed the most, And I was sort of taught that at a young age, and there's some similarities there, like even in the Air Force, and like thinking about like at the end of my career when I talked to this guy, and he's like, well, he's like, life circumstances can make you bitter or better. That the choice is yours, and I chose better. Thank you.
Oh, I love that. Make you bitter or better. Which wolf are you going to feed? So you did go to the Air Force. I guess a question I would have for you is, what was the calling to that? Growing up in the place that you were, I didn't know if you had influences, or you were near an Air Force base, or you knew people in the Air Force, or what. What was that choice about?
Yeah, so the choice, to be honest with you, in the beginning was not a choice at all. It was more of a demand sort of from my father, and he gave me the typical dad talk when you're 17, about to be 18, and he's like, you're about to be a man. It's either time to get a job, go to college, or get out. And I mean, I had terrible grades. It was really going nowhere in my life. And I talked to a neighbor. Yeah, yeah.
Three easy choices,
Yeah.
son.
Yeah.
Get a job, go to college, or get out.
Yeah, man. And and I talked to a Navy recruiter, and he was talking about being on a boat for like 6 months, and then I talked to an Army recruiter that didn't work out. And I was, I'm gonna talk to Dad sort of about the quality of life of the Air Force, and that's what I really wanted, was that, and to sort of see the world and get out of the small town I was in. And so there I was, July 18th of
Mhm.
2000, on my first fixed wing flight ever from Charlotte, North Carolina, because that's where MEPS was, to San Antonio, Texas, for basic training.
That was your
It was
first
my
flight
first fixed
ever?
wing flight. So I had a rotor wing flight actually in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. One of my good friends growing up, her dad bought us this like tour type thing, and I was like, a moment in there where like she even came to my retirement and said, like, at that moment I knew aviating in some way would take a big part in your life.
Oh, so what was that like when you flew up in the air for the first time? Did you feel a calling? Did you feel like, oh, this is what I should be doing?
Yeah, and the way I looked at it was like, I'd made a decision at that point, and my dad even told me, he's like, when you make this decision, there's no coming back. You're gonna have to stick with it. And so I put in the book there, I put, live a house money life, like, and what that means really is like, how much more aggressively would we take risk and gamble with the house's money, right? And that's the way I started looking at life at
Right.
that point, and I was like, I can't be scared, I can't look back, because if I look back, I'm lost, right? And that's eventually in the Air Force what got me my wings. So
That's incredible. I want to touch on that a little bit more, but I want to go back to your dad's comments and kind of his decision of you becoming that man. Um, so it's interesting. You seems like you have strong men in your family. Your grandfather, clearly a model of manhood. Did you see your dad as a model of manhood, if not in the same way, but still a model that you wanted to aspire to?
oh yeah, and I always tell people, my dad gave me the greatest gift he could give a son is, or a daughter, is to believe in them, right? And he believed in me, and he didn't
Mm,
want to see me fail, right? And I looked up to him for his morals and his work ethic, sort of the same theme with my grandfather there, and always always willing to help. Is a big thing in my family.
Hmm. And so when you went off to Air Force for the first time, and you're in a brand new situation, clearly brand new place, it must have been exhilarating, right? Because I mean, I get it. You're a young kid, and you're like, I've been in this small town my whole life, and I love my small town, but man, I'm ready to see something else. I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to get some more
Oh yeah,
exposure.
and so basically that at that point in my career, right? Like there was words like patriotism and like one of the Air Force core values is like service before self. Like I didn't know what that meant really until like later on in my career, and I'm at home actually on leave.
Mm-hmm.
10 years halfway in my career there, and I'm with some friends at a pizza place, and I look out, man, and I see the same street that separated the two sides of Main Street my whole life, right? And what I'm getting at is I see the same cracks in the road, and I realize, like, that's sort of back to my grandfather's words, and I actually heard this on one of those House of Dragon shows, but the quote is like, what is this brief mortal life if not the pursuit of legacy, right? And I was like, I don't want to leave cracks, I want to leave craters, and I want to be remembered for doing something good that makes a difference, and I decided to get in the fight, and I joined the mighty 16th Special Operations Squadron on the AC-130 gunship.
Wow, that's a hell of a decision.
Yeah, it was definitely again one of those things when it's something you definitely want to have to you want to do that job. There's no like maybe if like when you sign up for that, you even sign a letter saying like, hey, this is what the gunship is like, this is what you'll be doing. This is a high ops tempo, and and I tell people you belong to USOCOM, the Special Operations Command, as their close air support asset, right? And so at that point, when I signed the letter, I knew, I was like, yeah, this is it. There's no coming back, and I want to do this. And I had read a book called Chosen Soldier by Dick Couch, and in the beginning of that book, it has the Isaiah 6:8 verse, right? But basically it's these Green Beret guys, and it shows what they're doing for training and how they go through it, and it, that verse is like the send me verse, right, which is very like special operations centric, and at that point, for sure, there was definitely no looking back, and I wanted to be a part of something bigger than myself, like way bigger than myself.
Sure, that is bigger than yourself. But you've mentioned this a couple times now about not looking back. And earlier in the conversation, I mean, we've only known each other for 30 minutes, but this idea of looking forward or being either present or forward, but that looking back, that's the kind of the kiss of
Right.
death, right? That's something you can't do. Has that always been part of your life, or is that something that was kind of drilled into you especially when you join this part of the Air Force, that there is no going back? I sign a letter. I'm right. This is it. And there's a determination and a deterministic perspective of that life. Is that something you learned, or do you think that was always
I think
part of you?
it was always part of me. My senior year in high school, we wrote you ever heard of those time capsule letters where you write like what you think you're going to be doing? And when I went back for this book signing, and my mom asked me if I wanted to read it. Excuse me. Yeah, she still had it, right? And I talk about it in the book there about how I'd never opened it, but she asked me like, do you want to read it? And I was like, no, because like I can't change anything in the past, right? Like it's important to know where you come from. Your roots is very important, but it's more important where you're going, right? And that's where I get into the wings part. And I like I said, man, I want to do something that mattered, and I got to fly and fight beside our nation's best, man.
Yeah. So what a remarkable experience, Anthony. And again, thank you for your service and the choice you made, because A, it's not an easy choice, but B, that choice to be in a combat mission oriented role, it puts you in conflict. Like you chose to go into conflict, like willingly and intentionally. I think that what did you find about, though, that either changed you, or did you think that those experiences revealed more of kind of who you were, and allowed your, most core person self to be shown, right?
Yeah, and I think it was all about the guy and girl beside me, and and those guys on the ground that need that close air support. And there's letters in that squadron, right? And in the gunship, you're providing that close air support for your Rangers, your Green Berets, your SEALs, etc. Right? And there's this one letter I remember, like right before you go up the stairs. It was my why, sort of my cornerstone of my why all these years. And this Rangers thinking the squadron and the gunship and the personnel for the close air support because he was able to go home and see his baby girl, and he was like holding his baby girl in his hand, and that was my everything, my why. That was my reason for being, was to make sure those guys to see another day, right?
Right. It's interesting. You talk about growing up in Appalachia where there's a sense of community. You said your grandfather would just give the shirt off his back in a moment's notice with no hesitation to help somebody else. Here you are choosing a profession where the community really means life or death. It really means in a moment where you have your community around you, and that is the only way that you can survive a situation or help someone else survive a situation. That's, I think, a remarkable through line in your life.
Yeah, and I think the reason why is because I know they would do that for me, right? And in that community, that in that world, I tell people I was surrounded by four quarters, not 100 pennies. Iron sharpens iron, and that's sort of the mentality there. And you would literally do anything for each other. So,
sure. And I think very few people, Anthony, actually experience that level of trust and that level of comfort, security, safety, knowing that other people can support you in that way.
Oh yeah,
right. I guess the question that I would have is, in moments like that, gosh, it must bring out the best of people, right? The people, because you're caring for someone else, it naturally brings out the best intention, best action, best willingness, because you really want to be for that other person because there's a love for that other person.
Oh yeah, and I call it in the book that touching the face of God. And somebody asked me what that meant the other day, and basically those scenarios, right, where like you're flying and you're on these missions and everything's against you, right, and it's there could be emergency procedures, communications, weather, the enemy, right. Everything's against you. That's the day that everybody that depends on you, your family, your nation, your friends, right, and your teammates, that's the day they need you to be your very best. And as part of the moon, right, is like you don't get to fall, you get to rise in those moments, and you find a lot about yourself and that community in that moment. And I always tell people that the darkest nights, man, that's when that moon burns the brightest for me.
I love it. So what did you find out about yourself in those moments?
I found out
when you reflect on it.
So I found out that basically, like, to not get, that I wouldn't give up in that point. That there's a moment I was on a Castleback helicopter at this point in my career where we took off. There's a runaway gun. We expended all our flares, which is what protects us from like surface to air missiles, communications trash. And it gets to a point where, the why in the back of your mind, right, sets in, and you realize that man, I'm going to get through this, right? And was it Henry Ford said something like, all these things are going wrong, right, in your life, and remember, aircraft takes off against the wind and not with it. And so you sort of learn perseverance through flight, in itself. There's so many parallels and lessons you can learn from just flying,
I never thought about that, and that's such an interesting way to think, where even the act of flying is an act of resistance and uplifting. I mean, physically uplifting and physical resistance because the air on the wings, right? And it's we've made such an unnatural thing seem so possible, and I would think that when you add combat to the dangerousness of flying, you're adding a layer of danger on top of a layer of danger.
That's a very true statement. I mean, it's been a hard couple of years for aviation with some of the stuff going on, and just stepping to an aircraft. Even, I hate to say it, like even an airliner, right? There's some inherent risk with that, and I remember there's this in the squadron. It was in Old English, and basically it was like this part where I would check myself, like no matter what I had going on in my life, just to get mentally clear, just to fly right. It said, "We who pass through these portals stand tall." So I would take a second, close my eyes, and to me that was a staple for me. Like that was more important than a Notre Dame hitting play like a champion before they run out of the field to play football, right? Like, because I knew at that point what I was capable of, and I knew what my training had taught me, and that I had that confidence with that.
Did you like the training?
No, not to be honest with you. Well, there was parts I did like, but definitely like the survival school and stuff like that. I tell people that was some of the best training I ever had in my life. But I don't ever want to do that SEER school again. Yeah, 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 man. You find a lot about yourself in those moments too, right?
Yeah, you don't like it, but you need it. I think the impression I have from you, Anthony, is that there's a sense of resilience. There's a sense of I can. There's a sense of positivity in the fact that in the midst of adversity, you can you know not only survive, but you can succeed. You can get through. Um, is that something that you're talking to your son about in terms of you know that sense of perseverance, and do you share those types of things with them?
Yeah. I have a 9-year-old daughter, and yeah,
Oh, a
yeah.
daughter. I
It's okay.
apologize.
It's not, no
My
problem at all, brother.
apologies.
But yeah, I definitely tell her one of the most important things in life is always getting back up. Because you can't change the past, but you can change your mindset and think positive, and you can change the outcome of that the near future, right? So I always try to instill that with her, so you're never out of the fight.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what your grandfather taught you. Get knocked down 7 times, get up on the 8th time. So, you've got, out of all of those experiences, you wrote a book called Moonchild. I guess the question is, why did you write that book? Why did you feel the need to take all your thoughts and share them and expose them in such a personal and intimate way?
Yeah, no problem. So, basically, I'd done my last appointment there right on my 20th year mark, and I got back, and it was really slow. I didn't get to really do my job or anything like that. And I just remember thinking the light at the end of the tunnel, this career is coming to an end, right? And I hit the retirement button, and
Mm-hmm.
what, to be honest with you, started out as a weekend drinking habit, ended up being at least a pint of hard alcohol a night, and with sleeping pills, you name it, to go to sleep, right? And yeah,
Oh my gosh,
because
really?
I knew my identity was in my mind. I thought my identity was leaving. I thought all that was gone, right? And the mission and everything that comes with that. And so my wife gave me the the ultimatum of, it's me or your daughter or the bottle. And thank God I chose her and my daughter. And so with that, I had to go see a psychiatrist, and or I chose to see a psychiatrist, I should say, but basically prolonged exposure therapy, is how basically when you write your story out at first, right, and you write it over and over, and the idea behind that is to get comfortable being uncomfortable. So, sort of like we're doing now, we're conversing right back and forth, but you're doing that with this psychiatrist, and first time I told her the story, I'll be honest, I cried, she cried, and some of my darkest moments of my life, and she's like, you should tell your story over and over and over, right? And once I filled out that DD 214 paperwork, right, that shows I'm retired, and I leave this personnelist office, right, and there's no door handle after I walk out that door, meaning that's the last time I ever had the uniform on, right, and you can never really get back in. And I was like, maybe this is a common theme of struggling with identity and sense of purpose and my why with other veterans, and maybe I can pay it forward. And basically, it's okay not to be okay, and it's not okay to do nothing about it, is the point I'm getting at. And basically, if one person gets help reading this book, then that would be a true blessing for me. And on the other side of that, for civilians, there's some really dark stories in there about some of the missions I was on, and this is show them sort of what goes on while they're sleeping in America.
We'll be right back. Yeah, that's actually a really thoughtful statement, because I have no idea what's going on, truly. What our military folks are doing day in, day out, the risks that they're taking, the tensions that they're going through, right? And so there is, I don't know, I'm not going to say out of sight, out of mind, but there's just an inherent blindness that we have, where we can't help but take security for granted because we're living in it every day, right? Yet you service members are the ones that are providing that protection and security. Did you feel like, especially when you left the Air Force, and the community of people who all know what that's about, and left that to quote unquote civilian life where nobody knows what that's about. Did you feel that was really unsettling, that they couldn't understand
Oh my
you?
God, it was very unsettling, and it was still I'm still sort of getting used to it, to be honest with you, and there's some dark humor, man, that comes with that life and that world and that so I sort of have to.
I would imagine, right? There has to be. You have to laugh about it because you're not going to cry about it.
And pranks, you name it, man. We had a full arsenal of pranks we did on each other because we loved each other as part of it, And so I sort of had to like draw some of that back, and just talk as clean as I can, I guess you would say, in a civilian workforce. But yeah, for the most part, people still where I work now, man, they know how that life is, and every now and then you'll get a good joke out of me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I also think too that we have a hard time understanding the risks that you guys go through, and I imagine that you have to stay connected to those folks, so at least you can share stories and process some of your experiences with people who might understand it.
Oh yeah, and it's been overwhelming, honestly, with the texts and the emails that I get. And I'm glad they do that from the men and women I used to fly with, and fly beside and everything. And they're like, man, like they're coming towards the end of their careers, a lot of them, and they're like, I'm gonna get help as well, and that's a victory for me. And one guy called me, and I talked him off a ledge, to be honest with you, and it's like these things always happen like 3 a.m. It seems like, right? And basically got up to the VA hospital and the help he needed. But yeah, that happens, and you see sort of this common thing where, like, we're all very normal men and women doing very extraordinary, uncommon things. So it's like I said in the beginning, it's okay not to be okay, but in the end, you need to get help if you need it.
Yeah, no, I like what you mentioned, that you're just normal people doing abnormal and unusual and extraordinary things that so few people can connect to and relate to, because I still think the percentage of people who actually choose military as a career is a relatively small percentage of the American population, versus something like World War II, where you had so many civilian soldiers move in and so many people could have a shared and common understanding of what they went through. I'm assuming that you're still in touch and really deeply close with the folks that you were closest with, and that love doesn't go away. I imagine that will persist your whole life.
I think that love's going to last till after we all die. That's just a level of just camaraderie and brotherhood and sisterhood that comes with that, and it's another culture of sense of community. It has to be strong. You have to have each other's back, and there's no time for bias and all the other stuff. But you just like my grandfather would just give them the shirt off your back, and they would for you, and they'd literally die for you.
Yeah, yeah. So in terms of the book now, what else are you doing with contacting veterans? How are you reaching out and helping other men and women make that deep transition? There's a significant transition from the military into civilian life.
The first thing I did was actually my hometown book signing. I did at City Lights Bookstore in the mountains there, a beautiful place. And there was a guy, it was awesome, man. Cause like there was men and women that joined, different branches, Marines, Navy, Army, and I didn't know they were in the whole time I was gone. So we got to trade some stories, and we also got to trade some talks about resilience and perseverance and getting help. And then I'm trying to go back to Asheville, North Carolina in April if they say yes to the VA there to talk to the veterans there and all that stuff. And what I really want to do, man, is I want to develop this app that would be called the Debrief, where every veteran, first responder, these uncommon type jobs, where you would speak into this app and sort of like, with AI sort of soft edit it for them. And then either really cheap or free, they would have the option to get it published and, edited and published for free. That's sort of the idea, to sort of share these stories and realize that, it's like a domino effect. And in the end, helping is healing.
I think it's a brilliant idea, because, you have, I'm assuming that also too, I guess I'll ask, does telling the story of your experience help you process that tension and the challenge and maybe the trauma that you did experience?
Oh yeah. And every time I wanted to drink, man, I'd pick up that pen and, I'd have this Charlotte's Web of emotional words and throw them on a napkin like Eminem style, right? And wake up in the morning and try to make sense of that, Some of my darkest thoughts, the darkest moments, but it's very therapeutic, and I highly recommend it to any veteran or anybody for that matter to just bleed it on the page, and you'll feel better.
Yeah, yeah. I imagine too that in moments like that, you know, you know, your grandfather found faith after he decided that he was been be done with moonshine and kind of walked the path. You mentioned after that that you were saved as well. When did that
Yeah,
happen?
to be honest, like I wasn't saved till after I joined the Air Force. I remember, so this is Christianity here. So growing up, right, I had the idea that just being a good person would get me to heaven, and just good deeds would get me to heaven. And there was a missions guy actually named Joe, and it was called Missions to Military in Goldsboro, North Carolina. And so I go to this place and start going to Bible study and stuff like that. And I'm at this this Baptist church, and the preacher says something like, the two most important decisions in life is one, who you're going to marry, and two is your personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And I realized at that point I wasn't saved, and that's when I gave my heart to Jesus. And yeah, and there's a spiritual side of healing, and I'm sort of glad you asked that, man, because there's a point where like I had realized that I had turned to everything, the bottle, other people, even a psychiatrist, which is great, right? That works, but there's a moment where I realized that I turned to everything except for God, for healing. And in that moment, He pulled me out of the ashes. And yeah, man, it was a surreal moment, and I'll never forget that. And I think with God, sometimes being alone, right, you'll be in this isolation before elevation type thing.
I think that's really amazing that, with all the worldly support,
Right.
right, of people whom you love and who love you, um, there still is this sense of a higher power coming in and, like you said, plucking you up and saying, no, there's a bigger purpose for you, right? And I see that in you, and you just have to pay attention to me and listen to me, and that realization can happen. Is that
Oh
what it
yeah,
felt
I
like?
think God or whatever you believe in, it's a very distinct way of getting our attention, right? And it's very loud, not audibly, but like with words, but it's a very loud statement that is made spiritually with that.
That's beautiful. I think that's very interesting. Have you found that that brings contentment to you? Do you feel just every day? Do you feel like there's a, I don't know, like a wind underneath you, or at least something that can carry you if you fall
Yeah,
down?
and I think the assurance of like I know how this story ends, right? Being a Christian, I believe when I
Mm.
die, right, to not necessarily fear it, right? To believe at least I tried to leave somewhat of a footprint on this world, and again how I was remembered, and and then go to heaven. So that's sort of how I've learned at a very young age that the moment we start breathing, you start dying, right? So to be content with that.
That's interesting. Do you find it challenging to, right now you said, if you think about drinking, write things down. Is that still a struggle for you, or has it been easier for you as you've gotten distance from the
It's
moment?
getting easier. I will say that, but it's definitely like that level of like alcohol and like addiction in general. Right? It's a very, very hard thing. Every day's a marathon. I tell people, and
Oh,
I tell
wow.
people like I was never this guy that could be like, hey, like give me 3 beers and I'm be social, right? I'm an all or nothing type person, and I looked at life like that, and I when I would do, I just get blackout drunk at a point in my career, right? And yeah, so I think my friends, my four quarters, they respect my boundaries, right? And yeah, so it's a beautiful thing when you start healing from that.
Yeah, of course it is, because it's much easier, I think, to say I'm going to have no alcohol than, oh,
Oh
I'll
yeah.
have one. Right. I mean, the boundary is very
Yeah,
clear.
yeah. And have you ever like you've heard of like alcoholism to the level like you wake up with the shakes? Like I was there, bro. Like I had that level of it, right? Yeah, yeah, man. And it
Wow.
was just feeling terrible. I remember like walking through the door, shotgun, and literally half a pint and then the pint, just to get binge drink and then go to sleep,
Wow.
and this vicious cycle that keeps going, right? And that's where when I was pulled from the ashes, I broke free from that, and it was a beautiful thing to
Hmm.
just be sober, and to enjoy my health for once in my body, and my it stole so much from me, and I get to actually enjoy my family.
Absolutely, of course. And I think that also that there are sometimes when you just have to go through things and you don't learn it until you go through it, right? No one can tell you. You have to live it, right? In order to kind of get through and be stronger than you were before. So what are you most looking forward to next, Anthony, in terms of the next chapter of your life?
Yeah, so doing this thing called Operation Song, where they pair the veteran up with a writer, and something really cool. Hopefully, coming out with that in a few months or whatnot. But I just want to the new mission now, right, is being the best dad I could be, the best father I could be, best friend I could be to someone. So best podcast guest, I guess. So just keep getting better with everything every day. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I get it. Do you still fly recreationally?
No, I just do the flight simulators here at Cannon Air Force Base, and basically the job is called synthetic environment coordinator, and that's a real fancy way of saying like the guy who writes this or the sort of the script and scenarios for like the gunship mission, right, and the MCJ, and you can put weather and emergency procedures. It's pretty amazing, man. I'm not a big gamer, man, but I get to play like this $80 million like virtual reality video game that moves like every day. It's awesome. I love
it. That's great. That's wonderful that you enjoy that, right? I mean, I think that for you, the impression I have is like this next mission. Well, Anthony, it seems like the through line is still a mission of service, right?
Oh yeah. I've always I loved to serve, man. Once I sort of realized what service was, about midway through my career, and I think that's the best part of me, was the men and women that I flew with. They held me to a standard and they had my back every day. So it's a hard thing to leave, but I'll always take those lessons from those guys. And I'm going to sort of paint a picture about that. What I mean by all that was my first flight on AC-130 gunship, and I tell this to all the time, and it went so bad, man, to where the instructor said, you're the reason I have to brief seatbelts on airliners, right? And yeah, it was that bad of a flight, and I'm licking my wounds, and he sees me, and he's like, "Hey, what's the most important word in the dictionary?" I was like, "Man, I don't even know where I'm at right now, bro." And he's like perseverance, and then another word I would like to talk about on the root side of thing is I found out this guy passed away recently, but I was at a basketball camp, Smoky Mountain High School, and this guy coached at Lenore Ryan College, and he comes down, and this older guy, he shoots like 100 free throws, man. And I swear to God, like this guy did not miss. Like I was amazed by it. Everybody was amazed by it, right? And the point he's making wasn't just about basketball, man. He's like, the key to success in life and anything is repetition. And I always tell people, man, with perseverance and repetition, you can go anywhere in the world.
Right. Because, there's the adage that, Michael Jordan says the 10,000 hours, right? You just build that in. And it's interesting because the repetition can be something physical and manual, but the repetition can also be something mental, right? The repetition of your thoughts, the repetition of a habit. Those are all things that if you persevere and you maintain that repetition, that could be something that also changes a life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I think we're all creatures of habit, especially in the flying world, and there's checklists, and, they're going to give you gun malfunction after gun malfunction after gun malfunction. And you realize, like there's certain things in combat they can't simulate, and you realize that after the fact, but that's why they're hard on you, and they're getting that repetition into you. So when it happens, right, and especially on that one mission I talk about, like you realize like none of this is foreign to me. Like I've been here 100 times in training, so you're right. And there's even a term we use called chair flight, right? Like you could chair flight a pre-flight, you can chair flight a landing. Basically you visualize all this, to the point where you start doing it and manifest it physically,
That also too, I mean, in those moments, that kind of discipline, or, it's an interesting thing. It's like the confidence of your mind and so bear with me, because you've done it in your mind, you're like, well, I've already done this, so I know I can do it because I've already done it.
That's a very awesome way to look at that, Chris, because you've already seen the outcome. You've done it, right? You've won. So now you're just physically doing it, right? So it's a beautiful thing.
So you can do it because you've already done it, even if it's in your head.
Even like this, like podcasting, man. One of my biggest fears is talking in front of a lot of people, and here I am on a podcast, right, and these different podcasts, and it's something you definitely, the more you do, you get more comfortable. I compare it to a quarterback, right, and you know how you're comfortable in the pocket. You ever heard that term, right? Like you have these tight ends coming at him, right,
Mm-hmm.
and the ones that are great, they just sit there, and at the last moment, they snipe the most beautiful throw, like Tom Brady or somebody like that, and it's just patience in the pocket, you know.
Yeah, and comfort in the
Oh yeah,
pocket and knowing that you know what you're going to do. I think, it's so funny, Anthony, that confidence is something that is, I don't know, maybe it's not undervalued or not talked about enough, but it's got to be one of the most powerful things we have,
oh
especially
yeah,
as men, right? A sense of confidence of what we can do and who we can be. And it's almost like if there starts with a belief and a confidence that we can do something, man, it's a whole lot easier to do the thing that we want to
oh yeah.
do.
And I've enjoyed, like when I was confident about something, like you said, I enjoyed that task, what I was doing, you know, because I knew often the outcome of that, you know, and and there is a part of flying and training that'll definitely humble you, you know, and and you're supporting like our nation's very best, right? Like those super ninjas, and there's a level of humility just being in that world, you know, and stuff like that. So, but yeah, so you're sort of confident, but at the same time, you don't, you know, uh, you're humble with that. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. Yeah.
Confident and humble. So I will tell you, I'm a fan of the English Premier League soccer group, and I don't know if you know it, but there's the way they do it is they've got a rank of 20 teams, and if you're at the bottom three teams, you get what's called relegated to the lower tier, and you're out. And then the people at the lower tier, the top three teams, come up. And so I fell in love with them, and I fell in love with a team called the Brentford Bees. Brentford had been for their entire 70 plus years in the lower tier, and the reason I fell in love with them, this will make sense. It'll come back to what you just said. Anyway, I'm watching this soccer match, and the fans are going crazy. They're going bananas. They're so excited, and they score a goal. And the announcer says, and it's their first top flight goal in 73 years. And I was like, shit, that's my team, bro. That is my team. Let's go, Bees. But one of the things that the manager was talking about, he says, look, we're going to be humble but
Oh yeah.
confident. We're going to be humble because we know we're a smaller team in this huge league, but we're going to be confident. And there's a balance of humbleness and confidence that's kind of like this, I don't know, like these scales that balance each other out, but it's a magical
Oh yeah.
combination.
Yeah, and I think that's, and one of the oldest quotes is like "Know thyself," right? And I think there's a beautiful thing about being sort of quiet, but knowing your capabilities, right? What's that term? Speak soft but carry a big stick. You know, I forgot who said that. It may have been like John
Sure.
Gotti or something like that. But yeah, that's sort of the gunship in general. Now I think about it, you know, it's a good way to put that.
That's interesting. Because it's interesting, you have to be confident because if you're flying a gunship, you literally have the lives of your passengers in your hands. Also, if you're protecting forces on the ground, you have their lives in your hands in terms of figuring them out. So you've got a lot of lives that you're responsible for in that moment. Yet at the same time, there's a humbleness because you have an entire support team around you to help you, and you have a team that's on the ground that's risking their lives too. It's like the perfect moment of those two
Oh yeah,
feelings.
yeah, and it's I always tell people, it's like it's a beautiful thing when you see this organized chaos, you know, play out. And you know, back on the H model gunship, we flew with 13 crew members. Now I think the Ghost
Mm.
Rider, they have like 7 or 8 people. But yeah, you would have all these 13 men and women working together simultaneously with 5 different radios going off, and just when that round goes out the aircraft to save someone's life, right? Because that's really what it was about. Like that is the biggest why of the gunship. That is the biggest win. That's the greatest feeling I've ever had in my life, was the first time someone got home because of that round leaving the aircraft. And it wasn't about me, and it was about those guys and women I flew with and the guys on the ground. You know, that's how I always looked at that, with,
Mm-hmm.
humility.
Yeah, because he
Oh
got to
yeah.
see his daughter, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and not only that, but what you were able to do, Anthony, was you also protect
Oh
that
yeah.
daughter, right? You're not just protecting the man; you're changing her
Oh yeah.
life too, because you're giving her father
Yeah,
back.
man,
It's
man, that's a
beautiful.
good way to put that, and that hits hard. Thank you.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. Well, I think you're remarkable, and I'm so grateful that we had the chance to chat. So I guess I have a final question for you. I ask all my guests, who is someone that you know that I don't know, but that I should know?
Someone that I know that you don't know that, but you should know. Let me think about that. Man. I would say there's an author back home that I think you should definitely know. Is it? Do you want me to say her name, or is it?
Yeah, go ahead. I'd love to know.
Yeah, her name's Annette Sanuck, and I told her I always looked up to her, and she I believe she wrote "Even as We Breathe," and she's from went to my high school, and very proud to know her, and she's this amazing person, amazing athlete, and amazing author. So I think you should definitely pick her brain when you get a chance.
I'd love to. Annette Sanuck?
Yeah.
I'd love to. I'd love to get to know her. Well, Anthony, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation, and I'm so grateful that you spent the time. And I do thank you for your service, and I mean that with the full heart. And I'm really proud that I got to meet you and know you, and I'm really proud of what you've done.
Thank you, Chris. I think it's awesome what you do. I think every platform this day and age is precious, right? And it's a gift from God Himself. So thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me tell this story, and I appreciate you.
All righty, take care. Have a great night. Blessings to your family.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Well, oh my goodness gracious, thank you so much, Anthony. What a gentle man, right? You could just tell in the entire conversations his sense of humbleness, his sense of where he is in his life, wrestling with some of the things that he had seen and done, and kind of and how he recovered from it. I love the idea that he found solace and serenity growing up in Appalachia, and then as a bookend finds an echo of that in his adult life. It's New Mexico, just different rural environment, but it's still that rural environment. There's still this sense of the greater out there, right? If you remember in stories of the fireflies, this connection of the supreme and how that's connected to nature, and why not find that when he's older in New Mexico, where the nature is supreme. So what did I learn from Anthony? I learned that you can go back to certain things in your life when you were younger that made you better, and seek those out again as an older person to help with some of the dark times and to help you get better every day and find that serenity as you can. I love what he's doing with his work. His book is called Moonchild. You can find it on Amazon. It tells the story of his combat missions and how he recovered from those, and is using that to help other people recover as well. I love his story. I love his mission. And thank you so much for listening. And if you want to be a part, visit menfolkjourneys.com. Please tell other people about this podcast. Let other men know so they can listen too, and we can all get better together. Again, thanks for listening. Word bid Falarid.